Welcome, my name's Alden Reed, and you're watching Arcane Tablets. It is past 1 p.m., so time for a midnight riff, a late night riff here. Alright, so I do want to talk more about food. Yay, I know. It's kind of just the thing, and, I know this intuitively, right? And even if I didn't have my intuition, I've been receiving so many signs and symbols and synchronicities from God, right, for a long time. This is just kind of the key thing. And I'm doing probably better than I give myself credit for. I'm transitioning really to being pretty much a fully raw vegan. And ultimately, I think the goal is to be kind of a frugivore, which, is kind of the same thing as being a raw vegan, but probably just a little bit more restrictive. I think the key is to focus on fruits, right? Fresh, sweet fruits. And then other things with seeds and other nuts and seeds and maybe, some leafy greens and some other things like that. Probably that's more or less okay. But the key is fruit, really, more than anything. That should be what's basically making up the vast majority of your diet. And it can be very challenging, absolutely. I find it very challenging. It's challenging enough to stop eating animal products, right, and move to just being vegan. But then moving to being raw vegan and eventually a frugivore, really, you just keep giving up more and more stuff. And it's weird, right, to live in a world where that's kind of what you're being called to do. All right? And that's more what I want to talk about. I'm not here to convince you to be vegan or raw vegan or a frugivore specifically. I mean, I've made some videos talking about why I think that's a good idea. But I'm not super called to focus exclusively on that. And I think there are a lot of creators now out there, more and more, just in the past couple of years, especially working on the subject. So, I'll let them talk about all the details and the nutrition and all sorts of other stuff. There's a decent chance if you're still watching this video, you kind of know about that. I mean, it might be a turnoff if you're not kind of feeling these things, and I can understand, and that's actually kind of what I want to talk about. So if you are still an omnivore, or maybe if you're just kind of a regular vegan or something like that, I would invite you to stay and listen to what I have to say, because some of what I'm going to do is just kind of break down, the larger implications of this, besides also just complain a little bit. It's tough, right? I mean, food's a great pleasure in life. And I think one thing that you really just realize that just hits you like a ton of bricks, as they say, even just when you become vegan, but then when you even start to take it further and go raw, right? When you also try to stop drinking caffeine and coffee and stop drinking alcohol, stop using drugs, right? You just kind of look around and it's just like, well, damn. Everyone's just kind of eating lots of food, eating tons of meat or other rich cooked foods, even vegan foods, and mainlining coffee and eating lots of candy and sugar, drinking lots of alcohol. And then you kind of realize that everyone is just going around high all the time. We're just constantly high on drugs and substances, right? And even meat is kind of a drug and a substance. It has certain addictive properties to it. That's one of the main reasons why people don't want to give it up. It's not just because they're intellectually thinking that they need it, based on nutritional guidelines, right? Emphasizing protein and other nutrients and things, right? And I don't want to get too much into that, but I do actually think that what a lot of people say is probably true, which is that if you're really putting the best stuff in your body, if you're on a raw diet and even really a frugivore diet, and certainly emphasizing strongly fruits and stuff, and if you can go through this process and get through a period of detox, and I'm still in a period of detox myself, and it's not pleasant, I'll tell you that. So the healthier you get, you do have to go through these periods where you're going to feel worse before you really get to the other side. So that's an important thing to remember as you sort of start this journey, if you are so inclined. But yeah, like I said, we're just eating this stuff all the time. Everyone is just kind of high on drugs, okay? That really kind of is the case. And that's part of the reason why people don't even notice so much that their bodies aren't feeling good. You're not really dealing with a lot of this stuff as well as you might think, but when you drink a lot of caffeine and eat a lot of cane sugar, and certainly when you take other drugs and, right, drink alcohol, it gets you high and it sort of numbs your body, so you don't really know what's really going on. But then when you give all that stuff up, then you really find out, and you're like, oh, damn, I feel like crap all the time. Just not good. And yeah, people are just kind of like going around high and all these things, and it definitely raises a lot of questions, right, about this world and this reality. And I mean, we don't have to take the most negative view of things. And by that, I really mean kind of the view that the Gnostic Christians took, right? And certain other spiritual traditions as well. Maybe not as extreme as the Gnostics, but a lot of spiritual traditions kind of get to this idea of just the physical world being, I don't know, pretty not what we're looking for is maybe a generous way to put it. Perhaps even kind of evil. And I don't necessarily fully agree with that. I think that there's a lot of things going on. There's probably a lot of players, okay? But, there probably is some malign negative forces and some evil beings, some evil meta-consciousnesses, right? Operating and who do sort of want you to be very, very physical. And in modern terms, we might say lower vibration or denser or all that stuff. And if you're in such a state, then you're going to be more in a reality, timelines, I don't know, the quantum stream, however you want to think about it, right? Where things are not as good. So, when you're just consuming a lot and eating animals and high on drugs and all this stuff, that also means that other things around you are probably not going to be going as well. Especially with the animals, right? I mean, the dominion of animals probably more or less goes hand in hand with humans dominating other humans as well. So if we want to move past class society and all the other negative things that we see human beings doing to other beings, if we want to fully see the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, fully applied to human society, then we probably do need to apply it to the animals as well. In addition to just generally taking better care of the earth and a lot of that other stuff, but it really does come back to what you put in your body and the food. All right? And like I said, when you start to give this stuff up, it's not even just that you're giving up the pleasure of enjoying these things, pleasure of drugs and all that, but then you also realize that so much of human society, so much of socializing, human social behavior is just basically organized around this. What do, right? We go to people's houses and we eat all sorts of meat and drink alcohol, or we go to restaurants and eat more meat, drink more alcohol, or even just other cooked food, right? Again, even if you're just vegan, you're not necessarily fully escaping some of this stuff, okay? You could still be eating a lot of cooked food and a lot of heavy foods that your body is probably not really wanting that much, and is also potentially going to keep you not vibrating as highly as you want, okay? And then also, therefore, potentially keeping you sort of locked in a reality that is better than being a voracious carnivore for sure, or even just an omnivore, but might be still decidedly mid, as they like to say, and might still be decidedly mildly dystopian, okay? And I know that can be a lot to hear. You feel like you've made such a big step becoming vegan, and you have, absolutely. If you can get to that point, and I think it's very hard, it was extremely challenging for me to get to that point, that's very well done. And you're definitely going to be living probably in a better reality at that point. I think, you can count on probably ascending to some higher timelines. But, if you're still eating a lot of cooked food and heavy foods and stuff like that, and certainly if you're still drinking a lot of coffee and alcohol or doing other drugs and stuff, there's going to be a limit probably. You're probably capping yourself as far as how high you can ascend. And not to scare you, but you might not be fully then escaping some of the things going on here. You might be in a better reality, but it might still be one that is continuing to develop on these dystopian tracks, maybe a mild form of dystopia, right, versus just a full-blown kind of hellhole dystopia that I think you're very likely to find yourself in however many years if you continue just on that carnivore and omnivore track, okay? But yeah, like I said, just like socializing, going to people's houses, restaurants and all that stuff, or what else you do? You meet someone at a coffee shop, and there's other things to do in life, but even those revolve around food often. I don't know. Going to most events, going to a sporting event, going anywhere, there's just food, alcohol, drugs, coffee, all this stuff, just all over the place. Even chocolate. All right? And I still do eat some chocolate. I'm trying to stop, really. Okay? I'm also trying to go easy on myself, all right? And I want to just be raw right now, and that's what I'm really focusing on, all right? And so, eating some vegan chocolate without cane sugar, definitely no cane sugar. Cane sugar is a major drug, like absolutely, all right? And chocolate does some good stuff. It does have some good antioxidants, and it is a fruit too, so it even is within the frugivore universe, absolutely. But it does have some caffeine and some narcotic qualities, and ultimately, at the very least, it's probably best to be very moderate in your consumption, okay? But yeah, people are just mainlining chocolate, mainlining coffee, mainlining alcohol, mainlining meat, mainlining cane sugar. Even our little kids, all right? And like I said, it numbs you, so you don't even realize necessarily how bad you're feeling and how much toxic stuff is really just negatively influencing you, right? And then you're also just kind of high all the time. And it's tough. I'm not trying to act like I'm holier than thou. I've spent my whole life doing all this stuff, and I still find it very hard to let go. Drugs make you feel good. And when you're living in a reality that's tough, I can understand that, And so I'm not trying to get too down on you for it, All right, I'm not trying to get too down on myself, even though I'm really trying, right? All right, like mostly these days, a little bit of chocolate. If I'm feeling kind of weak, I might have a green tea matcha or something, and that's probably about the max. So that's good. Not to say that I'm not still tempted to, just have a drink, a beer or a glass of wine, or I don't know, something else. Cane sugars, that's not too high. I mean, you can use other sweeteners too. There are some natural stuff, although probably good to be, moderate on that too. All right, I'm drinking my tea here, my herbal tea, my lavender and valerian tea to help me sleep, and got a titch of whatever agave in it, a little bit of coconut milk, and I'm going easy on myself. I'm trying to just move forward. So if this is resonating with you and you are feeling called to make these changes, but also struggling, I sympathize a lot. It's very, very challenging. It's a lot to give up. And it's not entirely unfair. I mean, to be asked to sacrifice certain things in order to get maybe something that's better, to ascend to some higher realities, some better timelines, where you are not living even in a mildly dystopian society where things are a lot better and you feel so much better. Okay? And I'm not there yet. I'm in the process of it. I'm dealing with it, and it's challenging. The detox and the letting go of all this stuff, which is masking how you feel, it's a challenging process. And it's easy to retreat back into drugs or meat or whatever. And again, meat also has a narcotic effect on you as well. All right? So I do sympathize. And also, if you're like me and very thoughtful and intellectual, and again, this is more what I really want to talk about. Again, so many other people can go over the details of, how a lot of this works. It's just what it says about reality. And I think that probably, like I said, there's some good stuff and some bad stuff, and we probably go through these cycles of ascension and descension, right? Maybe somewhat similar to the idea of going from the Satya Yuga down to the Kali Yuga. Or in Hesiod, right, going from the Golden Age down to the Iron Age and back up again. And that makes a lot of sense. Cycles, right? That's probably, I think, the most likely explanation. Because I would like to believe that we're not living in just some absolute hellhole, which is basically what the Gnostics believe, and even a conventional Christian view kind of believes that as well. Just kind of with Satan in charge and all that, right? And that's pretty bleak. And I don't really think that you can absolve God from that. I think the buck always stops with God, so, I'd like to believe, I do feel quietly, intuitively, that God is truly good and loving. And yeah, I guess it makes sense, right? Sometimes we will be existing in various lifetimes and descending, and we will be enjoying a lot more of these earthly pleasures. But also then the price of that is that things are not so great. Social relations are not so great, and lots of bad stuff happens, lots of warfare and slavery, at the very least class society, inequality, right? Poverty, all of that stuff pretty much is metaphysically, spiritually, fundamentally linked to eating all this stuff that is going to lower you, right? And being on all these drugs and stuff, right? So, I think to a certain extent we cycle through that, and it's okay, right? In that there's always going to be a rising and a falling. So even if we are in the process of rising and ascending right now, and I think we pretty clearly are, there will come a time, some point in the future, maybe many, many lifetimes in the future where we probably will descend again. And you'll still be conscious. You'll be in a different body and experiencing things differently, but we will go back to doing all this stuff, right? To dominating and controlling animals and using all these drugs, and then also just, all the other stuff, right? All the war and the inequality and whatnot, okay? And all these things probably do have to just kind of exist. There has to be some sense of progression, and there has to be some sense of contrast for good to have meaning, right? So bad things do have to happen. I think reality is ultimately just a story or a series of stories, a never-ending series of stories. Maybe each new world or universe or reality is kind of a new story. And a lot of the same things will happen, right? And I think we will ascend and descend and so on, right? And that's what I truly hope, I guess, because the alternative seems very bleak to me. I think, it's okay to still be in your body and want to feel good and enjoy food, enjoy raw food, basically, right? At the very least. Or at the very least, vegan food, but again, probably even more, right? And to enjoy the other pleasures of life, right? And it's okay to make love, right? Although maybe not so much to have sex, right? Especially just lots of casual sex with people that you're not really deeply connected to. And I don't think it's necessarily about always getting to know someone. I think it's just important to have that real deep connection, to have the sort of a magnetic charge that you feel with someone that's really drawing you towards them. I do kind of believe in love at first sight in that way, okay? But the point is, if you're going to couple with someone and make love with them, then you want to have this deep connection. It probably should not be about just raw physical attraction and lust and desire. And probably not even just about the desire to procreate either. Really, probably that strong magnetic connection needs to come first, and then if that's good and it continues to work out, yeah, then I think that's where the desire to procreate becomes healthier. But wanting to just procreate for its own sake, or wanting just to have sex because it feels good, again, that's probably more stuff that we do when we're descending. And it's probably stuff that we do kind of have to move away from. And when you're really down deep, when you've bottomed out at the end of the Kali Yuga and the Iron Age, it's really, really challenging and very frustrating. And it does lead one to having very dark thoughts. It does lead one to feel like we're in some kind of absolutely fallen, sinful world. Perhaps ruled by the demiurge or ruled by the devil or Satan. And I do believe there are some evil metaphysical consciousnesses and forces operating in our reality. And I'm not going to get too sidetracked about that right now. I just want to say that I do think that they're real. So I'm not dismissing that, okay? But I do believe that God is ultimately in charge, and God is love. And to the extent that those things exist, it's just because it's part of the cycle of creation and destruction. And the cycles of ascension and descension, right? Again, because bad things do have to happen in order for good things to have meaning, okay? And in order for things to progress. Because it's not really good to be immortal. It's important to move on at a certain point, right? And so it's painful to sort of accept that these things do kind of have to happen. But I'm trying to not get too caught up in them and take a completely bleak view of reality, especially material reality. Because I'd like to think that we can be healthy, that the body and the mind and the soul can actually synergize together in a good way. And it doesn't have to be just the body taking complete control and the mind just kind of spinning around, not sure what to do, and the soul just being completely shut out, which is really where most people are right now, right? Kind of just, again, taking lots of drugs, doing whatever, not following the golden rule, right? And then their minds are just spinning around, sort of not even really sure, trying to figure out what's happening, but just kind of giving in to that hedonism. And then also when you're just eating all this stuff and really vibrating low and not feeling good and on all these drugs, you're not really going to be able to listen to your soul and listen to your spirit very well. It's going to be a lot harder to access that and listen to God, right? And you can move back towards that stuff and it might feel more immediately good. And Lord knows, I struggle with this greatly. It's a epic battle sometimes. Almost all the time for me. And I think I am making progress, although progress is not really linear a lot of the time. It often is 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and that's okay. Again, I think that's just kind of how it goes, so. But it is a great struggle. When you're down here at the bottom of the Kali Yuga and the Iron Age, it is brutal. And especially if you're called to do this, and really in a very small group of people, right? I mean, I think something like 3% of the world maybe is vegan, and then, as I'm saying, of those 3%, how many of those people are still, using drugs and stuff? Probably most of them. It's probably less than 1%. In fact, I can almost guarantee it's less than 1% of people that are really trying to be raw and really trying to not use any substances or any drugs, right? That's where we really need to get to. So it is moving even just beyond veganism. It is involving these other things too. And it's a lot, when everything is revolving around those behaviors, right? When the social structure of reality revolves around that. And then also relating to what I'm saying about just how depressing it can be, you also just kind of clearly see, if you haven't already started to clearly see, just how negative and frankly just buck wild evil the powers that be are, and the things they want to continue promoting. And that's also just depressing. And I do have a lot of anger at God about this, just how these people could be allowed to just run things the way they do and just deceive people so greatly. And there are a lot of deceptions going on. Not just about food, but probably about a lot of other stuff too. Another tangent we could go on, several tangents we could go on there, but it's not great. And then you start to look at it sort of historically speaking, and, even though things have gotten a lot worse, definitely in the past 100 years or so, when I think the sort of powerful elite occult forces have, very much ascended to more powerful heights. Partly to do, especially with the rise in technology and certain other things, right? But in many ways, even though some things have gotten better, right? Certain things have gotten worse, so it's not great. And it does lead one to question things. It can definitely lead you towards a very nihilistic view of things. I do feel that way sometimes. And maybe it probably is still just all the things I'm going on and dealing with this detox and all that for sure. But, I do have a lot of questions, right? And I understand, again, if you have sort of a Gnostic view and just the whole food chain in general, and I don't know. I think, again, logically, the contrast, the progression, all that stuff I said, it does make sense, but I guess it's just, again, extra depressing when you're at the lowest point, when we're all sort of at the lowest point, and then you have to really work incredibly hard to try and get to a higher point and just leave so many things behind that you just took for granted for so long. So, I feel you. It's very challenging going through all these things. But I think it is what we're being called to do. And, you know, God's not trying to force us. We still have free will. Okay? But God is just kind of also warning us and letting us know that if we want to improve society, if we want to escape some of the really negative things going on and some of the even more negative things that are potentially awaiting in the future, that we are going to have to do this. We're definitely going to have to give up so much of this stuff. And if we do, things can get really beautiful and wonderful. Edenic and utopian and all that stuff, right? Anyways. I don't truly know, but I want to move on to start talking about some other stuff. I guess I'm just kind of making this video to sort of wrap up some of my thoughts lately about food and substances and the body and pleasure and whatnot, and how directly connected all that stuff really is to everything else that's going on. And that we can't continue to just keep compartmentalizing it and thinking that it's separate, right? It's not really about resisting the powers that be or even trying to change them through direct political action or whatever. It's actually really mostly about just what you're doing and putting in your body. And everything else, I think, really will flow from that. And, you know, you'll still be doing other things too. Maybe there will be times for political action and other things like that. I'm not discouraging that entirely. I'm just saying that all of that stuff is only going to work so much. There's going to be a limit to how effective that is and how much that's really going to change things. To truly, really change things, we have to do this other stuff. So, yeah, it's challenging. It's really challenging. I kind of want to give up almost every day. But I encourage you to keep going. Because I do think that there's a pot of gold, a pot of spiritual gold waiting at the end of this rainbow here. So, anyways, I want you to know that you're wonderful, and you're beautiful, and you are absolutely perfect in your imperfections. It's okay. We're in a tough spot. God knows that. It's not easy, but I think it is possible. And I think more and more people are kind of seeing this. Even if it's only a small amount, starting to see what's really going on, that the game is mostly just about what we're putting in our body, okay? More than a lot of other stuff, right? So, many blessings. I love you so much. God loves you so much. Let's all do our best to follow the golden rule and see if we can find the way and descend and get to some awesome realities and timelines where our dreams truly can come true. I'll see you again soon for another Midnight Riff. Until then, be well.